the most popular thing that Trump seems to be doing, and it is popular, is on measures around the border and security, and indeed on deportation. So that's an area where clearly Trump is much more popular with voters. And I think unsurprising then that you see many people in the White House leaning so much into that particular agenda. Now
to the US. Senior Republican lawmakers are condemning the decision of Donald Trump to fire the leading US labour market I knew I was going to struggle over that one, statistician, after a report that showed the national economy added just 73,000 jobs, which is far fewer than expected in July. Now, every Sunday at this time, we are joined by one of the Times' brilliant journalists stateside for a roundup of all the political news in DC. And today I'm delighted to say that the Times' Washington correspondent, Lara Spirit, joins me. Good morning, Lara.
Morning, Jane. How are you?
Very well, thanks. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, Lara. I said good morning because that was to you, because it is very early where you are. And we really appreciate you speaking to us. Now, Lara, let's start with the job market statistic. See, I'm not going to say that word anymore.
It's a tough one. It's a tough one.
The person who does the numbers on the job market. So Trump began his second term, Laura, pledging to bring down inflation immediately and to make America wealthy again. What's going on with the economy and with this statistician? I just wanted to go for it then.
Yes. So this is the statistician who led the agency that produced federal data on jobs and inflation, Erica McEntafner. I'm also struggling.
He's just got a very complicated title and name, and it's early.
Yes, she's an economist. She had bipartisan support, but Trump accused her of rigging the numbers when there was some difficult jobs data. Now, in the wake of Trump's tariffs, of course, most of which are still yet to come in on August the 7th, and I'm sure we'll talk more about that in a minute, but we haven't yet really seen the filtering through in the economy of any of those kind of more apocalyptic or indeed difficult predictions that many had said might come with the announcement of those levies. But this jobs data was quite difficult for Trump, and so some were relatively unsurprised when he went on the offensive in this way, and indeed fired the chief of the Bureau of Labour Statistics, who was appointed by Biden in 2023.
Right, and I also read that there has been some polling this week that the majority of American people don't actually think that Trump is doing well with the economy, which is interesting because obviously a huge part of his pledge was about making America wealthy again and him being the one person that could sort the economy out. What's not lining up?
Yeah, so this polling is really interesting. It was done exclusively for the Times, and of course it is Trump's 200th day next week, so it was done to mark that and to look at what voters thought about this. I think, in keeping with how perfectly polarized many people say America is, almost half, so 48% of Americans graded the economy positively or fair. 48% said it had been poor, or rather his second term. So his 200 days of his second term. So I think from that you can take that people are relatively divided still on the impact of the Trump presidency and indeed on him as a politician. But what was quite interesting was that rather than the economy, and it shows that there are some misgivings that voters might have about the prospects of tariffs and its impact on the economy, the most popular thing that Trump seems to be doing, and it is popular, is on measures around the border and security and indeed on deportation. So that's an area where clearly Trump is much more popular with voters. And I think unsurprising then that you see many people in the White House leaning so much into that particular agenda.
Into the stuff that's seen as doing well. Well, Lara, you mentioned the tariffs. So Trump signed this order on Thursday night, imposing these very steep tariffs on 66 countries, including the European Union, Taiwan and the Falklands Islands. Those will go into effect on August the 7th. The UK's in a pretty good position right now, aren't we?
Yes, so the UK is one of a handful of countries to have negotiated deals or indeed framework deals, which will see it avoid the worst of President Trump's tariffs. So along with now the EU, but also Japan, Vietnam, there are sort of a number of countries who have managed to get some specific deals with the administration. But of course, in many of these cases, we don't yet know exactly what that is going to look like. For others, particularly countries like Switzerland, which found out this week it would have a 39% tariff, really high, barring any successful negotiation before the 7th, which will affect, its watches, its chocolate, a lot of the machinery and the tools that it makes as well. There are countries here that are bemused and also quite confused about exactly how they're going to be able to get a deal in time with the Trump administration. Quite a few in Washington saying this is a good moment for Britain because it showed that actually it was front of the queue when it came to those negotiations and countries scrambling to make deals with the Trump administration, that compared to many other countries who are looking at much steeper tariffs, dozens with between 15 and actually 50%, 50% of course in the case of Brazil, which is a really staggeringly high tariff level, of course, weren't so lucky. So for that reason, many in Britain very relieved at this.
Yeah. Lara, these tariffs, I mean, they were announced right at the beginning of the year. They were threatened for April, postponed twice after that. Now we've got this August the 7th date. Do you think there's a chance that they could be pushed back again, or does it seem like actually they're going to finally bite the bullet with them?
Well, of course, there's always a chance with this, but in this particular instance, it does seem like those self-imposed deadlines are coming to a head. And I think that's one of the reasons why, particularly in the case of Switzerland, you see that officials there are very nervous about the 7th as the implementation deadline, and the reason why many will be hoping to see some sort of breakthrough before then. But for a number of countries, this isn't necessarily the most dramatic moment. So for a country like China, who has gone through, extremely complex, I guess you would say, last few months with regards to its tariffs. It's had 145% tariffs at the peak of that dispute with the US. Now, of course, down to 30%. So we really are in a kind of constant period of these negotiations, and I think Trump has come to encompass within these negotiations not just economic concerns but also political concerns as well. So in the case of Brazil, there has been mention of Jair Bolsonaro, who of course is a Trump ally, who is facing charges on inciting something like an insurrection in Brazil after that election. And what Trump sees as a real injustice towards Bolsonaro is part of that tariff case now, as indeed other countries as well in this particular time. So for that reason, I think it's just such a complex question, these tariffs, and you know with Trump that you can't always say with certainty exactly what's going to happen.
Absolutely not. You would be a fool to, Lara. Lara, we do know one thing we can say with certainty is that Donald Trump likes a bit of bling. He likes a bit of gold. What can you tell us about his plans for a ballroom inside the White House?
Yes, so more than plans, actually. It seems that this is very well advanced. So $200 million ballroom in the East Wing of the White House. There were images that were released on Thursday showing that vision for a big venue, 650 seats to replace the East Wing. And in keeping with the kind of neoclassical style, it will look relatively similar and will be paid for by an unnamed selection of so-called patriot donors. So part of the rationale behind this very opulent new renovation to the White House is the claim made by Caroline Leavitt, the White House press secretary, this week, that it's actually very difficult to host high numbers of people in the White House. And if you do so, you have to have a marquee or put up a tent ever so slightly further away. And that is, not really in keeping with the fact that as president, you want to hold very, very fancy events, presumably with lots of dignitaries and very important people. So to that end, we are having this renovation to the White House to begin in September. And it's quite interesting looking back at the history of, people making White House renovations. Sometimes they'd be very controversial. So, notably Mary Lincoln during the Civil War was very criticised for renovations to the White House in obviously very straitened times and very difficult times for a number of American families. This, because it is being paid for by Trump and these donors, is not going to be, you don't think, particularly controversial. And so far, something that, clearly many people in the Trump administration will be very happy to talk about.
I can't wait till we get the first selfie of you in one of those gold chairs, Lara. I want it straight on Instagram, please. Lara, is there anything else coming up that we should know about in Washington, D.C. this week?
I think the tariffs will be really interesting to watch because you will have, diplomats and officials running around manically this week in the wake of this 7th deadline. So that will be something that people will be keeping a very close eye on. Of course, we also should mention the pause negotiations, but the possibility of a ceasefire or a hope of a ceasefire in Gaza. Of course, Steve Witkoff, Trump's envoy was visiting the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, the aid delivery organization, last week, and there are questions as to whether or not after those negotiators left Qatar, saying that Hamas had made unrealistic demands towards a ceasefire. There are questions about whether or not they might resume negotiations sometime soon. Of course, we know that Trump is very keen to see an end to this conflict, and there have been reports here in the US that he is keen to see not necessarily a ceasefire, but actually at the moment a real final lasting end to this conflict. And what the implications of those reports will be very interesting to see in the coming days.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Lara. It's always great to speak to you on a Sunday morning from Washington, D.C. That is Lara Spirit, who is the Times Washington correspondent. And you can, of course, read all of Lara's work in the Times and online with a Times subscription.